and thanks for joining us. We are here for another session with Arrowhealth Bridge discussing platform enablement without the pain, scaling inside the EHR. We have two experts who are going to be sharing some insights with you on how you can enable your solution within cloud-based EHRs more seamlessly to create greater provider adoption. Today we have Dave Brodegard with Arrowhealth Bridge and Brendan Keeler, who is joining us as an expert in interoperability. You've probably seen him around the interoperability space. And I will let the two of you do a personal introduction to share a little bit more about who you are. Dave?
Fantastic. Thank you, Courtney. It's great to be here talking to the both of you. Dave Brodegard, CEO of Arrowhealth Bridge. We've been working on the Arrowhealth Bridge solution for probably the past 5 years, but most recently have created the Arrowhealth Bridge company to bring the technology further in the last year and a half. My primary responsibilities have been around product and really making sure we are driving this solution and driving innovation inside of the EHR.
Wonderful. Brendan?
Hey everyone, Brendan Keeler, based out of Portland, Oregon. I am the health API guy in terms of the newsletter I write, but that is a nice moniker to express the career. Worked in healthcare integration for over a decade, first at Epic, domestically and abroad in the Netherlands. I went to Redox, helping apps get connected to EHRs via standards. Went to Zeus Health, helping apps get connected to health information exchanges. And then I was head of product at a company called Flexpa, helping apps get connected to claims data from payers. So thematically all data and data exchange. I now run the interoperability practice at HDD Health, where our full services development and strategic consultancy firm. My practice focuses on, you may guess this, EHR integration, health information exchange, data migration, and EHR selection. And yeah, we've used and worked with Arrow in the past. We are a fan of almost all integrative technologies that accelerate innovation in healthcare, and so I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you both for joining us. Before we really dive into the meat of today's presentation, we just want to mention that there is a quick poll in the right-hand side of your screen. If you could drop us some feedback on where you're struggling with solution adoption, we would appreciate it. In the meantime, let's talk a little bit about the state of platform integration in health tech. Brendan, can you share just a little bit of insight in terms of what you're seeing for industry challenges in platform integration? Like what are some of those challenges that you're seeing, and what are some of the solutions that you're seeing percolate as best in class?
Yeah, it's a fun question, one of my favorites. In any industry, the first type of software to evolve is a system of record, right? Like the ERP or the property management system, the school information system. In healthcare, primarily the EHR and practice management systems are that. And as that matures, those things do a lot of work for the business, whatever the business type is, in this case, healthcare organizations, but not everything, right? There's other jobs to be done that it doesn't do or are underserved. And then you have point solutions that pop up alongside that want to solve those problems. Integration becomes a necessity in this. And I'm an analytic thinker about a lot of this stuff. So you feel like he's being really high level about it. It's because I think of it as like a study and a discipline. And the third thing that comes are platforms to facilitate that exchange, right? iPaaS solutions, integration platforms as a service, as a variant, generic API companies that normalize the experience for third parties. These are all standard things that evolve in industries and that use different hows, right? They use APIs if the system of record is more modern. They use more ancient formats, HL7, flat files. They may go direct to database, or they may use robotic process automation. And those things are all different hows to the same end of making it easier for point solutions to interact with these systems of record. And so the challenges there are, if you are wed to a particular how, you'll find that across the disparate landscape of systems of record, in this case EHRs, there's going to be different nuances. There's going to be different capabilities made available. Some EHRs will have many APIs, some will have none. Even in this industry where regulation, like health tech is a heavily regulated industry over the past 30 years. And as a result, actually has far greater standardization of integrative technologies across the systems of record. Like other industries do not have the benefit of FHIR APIs, of X12 as a format, of HL7 for various things as a format that are semi-ubiquitously scaled across EHRs, but actually don't do the full set of jobs to be done because there's many things that go on in an EHR. But they do help and shouldn't be taken for granted. They are valuable things that don't exist for property management or CRMs or ERPs. You don't have this uniform layer of integration, but at the same time, that uniform layer doesn't do everything. And so that can lead to pain and frustration. I don't know, ranted, I think, for too many minutes, but David, do you have anything that you want, any thoughts to that, prompts for you?
No, I appreciate your insight there for sure. And I just, I mean, everything you're saying, that's what we've been seeing in the market for the past, decade plus. And some EHRs do it better than others, for sure. And when I say better, I mean maybe meet the particular needs of a provider in a certain specialty. Even as you're kind of relating just the layout of the industry, it made me think, no two docs practice the exact same way. And while you'll certainly see trends and helpful tools, letting providers do their job the way that only they can and focus on the patient and focus on what the patient needs. And the way to allow that is to give them the tools that they need. And integration into the primary, the system of record is so critical in allowing physicians to focus on what they do best that can't be replicated by AI or anything else. Let doctors be doctors and just make sure all of the tools are at their fingertips to provide the best care to the patient. And that's a work in progress. And we're expanding on lots of different fronts. FHIR, certainly other APIs and things like that. It will continue to expand, and but that is the goal ultimately. Let the providers do what they do best and make sure that patients are receiving the best care they possibly can.
Yeah, and tools can drive more revenue. Like that is a primary goal, is to increase operational efficiency for the business. That comes by virtue of helping patients and being successful in helping patients. And so all tools are should be geared towards that outcome of making the business more successful, because then it can help people. If unintegrated tools have the trade-off of, yes, they probably help with some ROI, some business outcome, but in being unintegrated, they have the drawback of operational burden of double typing and the mistakes and risk there. And so it's obvious anyone who's worked that integration becomes necessary at a certain point. Like you can start improve things out in an unintegrated fashion, but you are constantly battling the weight of the operational burden, the administrative burden that you are putting onto the providers or other users, that an EHR native bundled competitor, which may be worse at the job to be done, doesn't have that problem. And so you're fighting the bundle. The point solutions main fight, there are many fights for them. It is a tough category of software to make, but the first and the primary is fighting the EHR bundle. Athena and Epic and every EHR, their goal in this world, like any software vendor, in the back of their head is to sell to new customers, yes, but to continue to expand and meet the needs of their customer base. And in a zero-sum world, that would mean every bit of tech dollar spend of that business is going towards them. And so there's an incentive structure that means that it forces a competitive nature that sometimes may manifest as not allowing technical integration. And so and they don't have that problem because they are inherently bundled and integrated. And so fighting back by integrating by whatever means necessary is, a challenge that every successful point solution goes through at some point. One other thing to just jump is, I think people think of the EHR market and they think solely of Epic, right? And that is not the universe. It's just not like, actually, if you peel back healthcare, it's a series of sub verticals, in a trench coat. That is, home health as a distinct market with, WellSky and, Matrix Care and Point Click Care. You have PT with Web PT and Prompt and things like that. And so, like, you actually look at it and there's hundreds of systems of record. And so that contributes to the overall integrative problem that, it is not a market like where PCs or something where it's like, okay, you have Apple, you have Windows, great. And so you can do two things, you're good. Or, mobile, you have Android and iOS. It's like, no, you actually have incredible fractal nuance, and each of those systems of record has a different capability set, both in terms of user interface, but also integrative capabilities they've deployed.
No, you bring up such a powerful point. It's interesting to see the parallels in other markets to what we're seeing in healthcare. Obviously, healthcare is a unique beast and has both positive and negatives that you don't see elsewhere. But you bring up such a strong point of, we even talk like, hey, the entire landscape is not just Epic, but Epic would love to think of it that way. Epic would, and I'm not throwing shade that direction, but it makes sense that any one entity, it's like, well, we want to be the solution. You shouldn't have to leave our walled garden to get the technology you need. We want to just bake it in and keep you inside of our domain. That's not nefarious. That's good business. That makes sense. I think of you brought up Apple and others. I think Tim Cook recently weighed in on Android and iOS messaging, and his statement was, well, you should just get an iPhone. Like that would solve everything, right? Which I'm sure is a little tongue-in-cheek, but I get why that is good business strategy, but maybe not what's best for the end user. Maybe not what's best for, in this case, the provider, the patient, etc. I feel like the groups that will surge to the top and provide the most innovation are the groups that embrace the fact that there are disparate systems out there, and that it won't just be Epic that just wins everything. It won't just be, any big names that just take over everything. This market will continue to be diverse. And if we embrace that and embrace interoperability, making things work together, then we can still accomplish what we're looking for, that kind of providing what's best to the physician, the clinic, the patient, et cetera.
There are actually very few, it's a really good point. There are very few markets, B2B systems of records markets, that don't actually structurally look similar to healthcare. Because like we think like, oh, it's like consumer, right? But consumer actually moves towards one or two winners, right? If you look at B2B horizontal tech, you get a similar thing. But if you look at vertical specific systems of record as technologies, you see property management has a fractal, layout of Yardi up at the top as the Epic of property management. And then you have RealPage and Entrata. And then you go down to like retail versus multifamily, and you actually see different similar like subspecialties or whatever. And so this is actually the case, and people a lot of times come to me and they say, Brendan, healthcare is so hard. Why is it so much more difficult than any other industry? I'm like, it is identical. It's identical structurally. It's just that healthcare, it has so many fractal. It is the largest vertical by market size, right? It's the huge part of our economy and growing. And it just means that it manifests as many different smaller markets. Like I just found out about like this variant of home care where it's called like personal care. It's a whole different set of vendors than home health, versus skilled nursing facilities and things like that. And so like the more you look, the more you're like, oh, there's substance use disorder EHRs. There's just infinite, smaller and smaller, you know, subverticals that have smaller total addressable market. But when you compare that total addressable market to entire different industries, you're like, actually, it's pretty big, and we need to figure out how to do all that integration. And for some of them, some of those, again, we have regulation that requires certain capabilities like Fire APIs, but not all, not all. And certainly because of the way our regulatory bodies act and have statutory authority, like we are not the type of federalism here means that we are not top down, thou shalt for everybody. It is actually regulatory backflips that we have to do to get anything done. There's a voluntary certification program that people only do when it's tied to Medicare money. So if you're not taking Medicare money, maybe you don't do it. And increasingly, we've seen that actually that trend with EHRs as fewer and fewer go through certification because of the burden relative to the benefit. And so we have some standardization, but across those fractal markets, you'll see very different profiles of, are they regulated or not? Have they opted into this program? And thus do they have APIs, either standardized or not standardized?
Right. I mean, just thinking of the diversity of the solutions that are out there, like that's here to stay with us. And just like you're describing with the regulatory, the regulatory side of things, and then the decisions that individual players in the market make because of those regulatory, guidelines. Yeah, there will continue to be that just the variety of platforms out there. It's interesting on a macro level, you can see that in the industry. I feel like where this plays out, and often what we see in interacting with physicians directly, is what this translates to at the micro level, where physician is in the room with the patient, is solutions that are out of sight are often out of mind. And so the provider may be working with a patient and coming up with a treatment plan for the patient, and that treatment plan sometimes may be limited to just the options the provider has at her fingertips. And if through innovation, integration, this kind of connecting everything we possibly can, if we can put more of those options at the provider's fingertips, that allows that provider and patient to make better decisions about their care, better decisions about what that patient actually needs if they have everything at their fingertips. Jumping back to the macro level, if any one EHR is kind of locked out of other, out of solutions, out of ancillary, products because of integration issues, that's a disservice to the provider. It's a disservice to the patient. But if we can, jump that wall, if we can bring down that barrier, then yeah, at the end of the day, the clinic thrives, the provider thrives, the patient thrives.
I mean, that's the businesses act, maybe cynical, but businesses typically act for their own best interests. It's like generically because they want to survive. And so that applies to software vendors. And so you're right, it takes particular particular vision to say, I am going to choose a co-opetition model, right? A co-opetition model being, I'm going to produce products, but I'm going to openly, either by being headless or having an open ecosystem, allow directly competing products the same level of access, because at the end of the day, the value capture on co-opetition is lower per product, right? Like if I can offer the patient portal as an EHR, and I let in competing solutions and give them the same level of technical access, then even if I'm charging in some fashion for API usage or whatever, that value capture is lower than if I sold them the product, the health system, the product. And that applies to all. And so the natural tendency of markets for systems of records is not towards co-opetition. It takes particular disruptors that see market opportunity in having a co-opetition and an open environment. It takes market demand. But like if you look across industries, you see people say, "Oh, Salesforce." Well, guess what? Salesforce has an open ecosystem, takes a tithe, right? They take like 20% or something.
Sure.
And two, increasingly with the AI era, they're shutting the door on certain classes of AI native products. And so like you see this over and over again, this pattern because of just the economics. What's interesting in healthcare is that we have a unique law, the information blocking laws from the 21st Century Cures Act, that when it came out, I was like, this is a useless law. It's so vague. What does it mean? I'm used to very prescriptive, API capabilities or certification criteria. And this law says, information blocking actors can't restrict the flow of electronic health information, and actors being providers, health information networks, and developers of certified health IT. So that's pretty broad. It can't possibly they can't actually possibly mean that. And then there's these exceptions that say, okay, for security or performance, they can actually do blocking. And so all those seem pretty broad too, and so they can just hide behind those, even if they're blocking. And that has been true, or been like people have been like, that's probably true, or like we're just going to ignore this thing until about 2 years ago when a analytics application sued a system of record, point click care, the electronic health record, and won this temporary restraining order. It was a preliminary injunction rather, that said, actually this method of data exchange, robotic process automation, that is allowed. That is a flow of electronic health information, whether it's not an API, it's not this standards-based thing. That is a flow of electronic health information. And in lieu of offering an equivalent manner or claiming other exceptions with proof, you're blocking information. And so that sort of shook the health tech world, because it is, once you apply that pretty broadly, you start to realize, oh, wow, a whole slew of behaviors are potentially information blocking. It changes the equilibrium from defaulting to a model of building the solution yourself and precluding competition to a co-opetition model. And now we see, between that court case and numerous other ones that have progressed, as well as the government authority, the Assistant Secretary of Technology Policy, the ASTP, formerly known as the ONC, they have put out an FAQ in December where they said, agentic access, RPA, these things, that's information blocking if you don't offer equivalent manners. And they put out a new rule, the proposed rule, the HTI-5 rule, that proposes that does similar language about agentic access and RPA. It's very fire forward. It's very much saying, hey, we want a fire future and APIs, but that doesn't solve everything. That is not the superset of everything that can be done in a user interface. And in lieu of you offering capabilities, EHRs, that are that superset, then you probably need to let RPA happen, is the takeaway of these, FAQs, rules, and the court cases. And there's nothing like it in any industry. There's some close parallels in automotive dealer management systems, like of all things, like car dealership software in Arizona. Like there's like cool court cases there, but that is just that state, and it's just not nearly as broad. And so there's just no parallel. Nobody's ever tried this before from a policy angle. But to your point, David, it's like, okay, what is best for the EHR is not the actual ideal for the provider. The provider should have full co-opetition, the full selection of competitive solutions to choose from is a thesis. Is a thesis underpinning this rule, and something that I'm personally very excited to see progress, to see if that's better outcomes, because we're at a period where I'll try anything to get to better outcomes in healthcare right now.
Precisely. No, I love the way you outline that. And even as you're describing it, I was thinking, yeah, where do we see similar regulation interpreted the way it has been in this industry? And I wasn't familiar with the automotive side of things, but I can't think of anywhere else. Like it's
I got
amazing.
one more. I got one
Okay.
more for you,
Yeah.
and it actually goes back to your example. So in Europe, they have what's called the Digital Markets Act, and that says these gatekeepers, which was just an arbitrary word they made up for
Sure.
big tech giants. These gatekeepers need to be like interoperable and not gatekeep in terms of fees. Like it's a lot of parallels. And so Apple, Google, like all those are affected.
Yeah.
And so Apple is on the hook to be offering the same text capabilities, the same like connect to Wi-Fi capabilities to third party, hardware and software vendors in a lot of ways. And so interesting parallels. I guess what do we learn from there? Well, Apple is slower to release certain functionalities as a result into the European market because they need to make it, there's work to make things interoperable. But that's the trade-off. Like that is a visceral example of the trade-offs of this policy choice. And do the benefits weigh the trade-off, the cost is what needs to be assessed there. And I think by and large, I think the answer is yes. So
Right. It would seem that so far the answer, yeah, does seem to be yes. I will say I'm always hesitant to say we've solved it from a regulation standpoint or from a technology standpoint, or anything else. I'm always hesitant to say like, yep, this is it. This is the solution. And part of that's okay. Like, let's make good steps in the right direction and solve tomorrow's problems when they come up. To your point, if it's working pretty good, great. If we feel like we've taken a step too far, great. We'll rein it back a little bit. It's going to be a give and take, but at the end of the day, what's best for the patient, what's best for the provider, what's best for the payer, what's best for the industry, that's what we're shooting for. That's what we're trying to do. And again, I don't point to nefarious actors or anything like that. Businesses are designed to make money. They're designed to be able to provide value at a sustainable price point. and I don't blame anyone for trying to do that. And so I think our objective then would be through regulation and also through innovation, on kind of the technology side, make it so the best possible businesses are the ones that will solve the problem for the patient, the provider, the clinic, the payer, et cetera. And I think we're headed that direction. We're getting there.
I mean, at least we're trying something new, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah, you're right. Like everyone's like, oh, policy, it's set in stone. It's like, absolutely not, right? Like you go from one admin to the next, it changes completely with it. They're like, oh, didn't mean that at all.
Unfortunately, right.
And so, like that, we will change and adapt, and maybe we'll look back and say, oh man, our policy choices here were terrible. Like, and maybe not for information blocking. Actually, I think as a principle, that's going to take some time to play out fully and see the net effects, those trade-offs. Whereas other things are much more measurable. Like here's a fire capability. Is there adoption? Is it making things better? It's more tangible for a prescriptive capabilities than these sort of the broader policy goals we see here. But we only are informed by the realities of today and not the realities of tomorrow. And we may look back and say, what we did here with the fire APIs? How dumb is that? Because we got language first interoperability now, right? Like we have robots that can just sort of talk to each other in free text. And like all this effort, my entire career, could be like, all right, that was stupid. In the same way that we look at fax and say, how stupid is that? Well, we forget that fax was revolutionary in terms of being able to transmit something across the country ubiquitously. And so like we're only informed by the truths of today in such a way that we look back at ourselves in 20 years and say, what was I wearing back then? Why are we sending things that way? And so, that's just a fundamental condition of the human nature. And it's not going to change, even if we think we've solved it. We've never solved it because everything changes.
Right. You bring up the facts, which is often, we all kind of joke around about, yeah, we're using, technology from the 1800s, and it's still on the forefront of, healthcare settings today. It's something interesting though, and this brings up in any solution, reliability is so important. And again, going from macro to micro in a busy clinic where you're 15 patients deep in a waiting room and you're trying to get through a particular visit, and do what's best for the patient. If I know something's reliable, even if it's antiquated, I'm going to go with reliability in that moment where there's a ton of pressure, where there's, I've got to think about a million other things. Let's just go with the reliable solution. And that, I think, is an element in all of this. Is like, at the end of the day, we can talk future technology all day long, but what works right now? What works today? What solves the problem that I have right now is so critical. And I feel like that's something we've seen quite a bit of. Yeah, in the future, I want all systems to talk to each other electronically without any problems. And we all look forward to that day. But today, I've got a physician that needs to get a message over to this other doc, and it's not working. So we got to solve that. Yeah, today's problems need to be solved today.
People, when they design and think about technical solutions, there's a couple classes of software, right? Systems of record, point solutions, infrastructure, network-based products. Network-based products facilitating communication, facilitating payments, the cross organizations, whatever it might be. Those are about, you termed it as reliability. Another word for it is ubiquity, right? Ubiquitous
Yeah.
solutions that are lower and more that are not as technologically advanced will be chosen over more technologically advanced network products that have insufficient ubiquity. If phones were reinvented today, we have no phones, and you came up to me and say, "Hey, Brendan, buy this phone, you can talk to me." I'd be like, "David, that's awesome. I'm gonna still be sending mail." Like you're gonna fall back to the ubiquitous solution
Yep.
because it's not reliable enough to use. It becomes a novelty until you hit an atomic network that allows you to accomplish a job to be done across a geography or a constituency that is valuable enough for the outcome, right? You go from novelty to atomic network to ubiquity, at which point you take it for granted. It's not a commodity, but it is a utility at that point, right? We both grew up through cell phone towers and stuff being deployed and it not being ubiquitous. And now certainly there's areas where it's not, but it's pretty close that you can assume that you can just
Yeah.
use these things almost nationally. And so that, in the stack ranking of network-based products, you're going to reliably use the thing that can do the job to be done across all stakeholders that you want to communicate, do payments with, do messages with, etc. And only once you've gotten to rough parity on ubiquity as a digital network or network-based product, can you start to look at the actual feature set layered on top of it of it's more secure, it's faster, whatever. Like that does not matter when it only works for one person. And I have to remember, oh yeah, for that person, go over here and click the portal or like do X. And so I think that's the challenging part of those product types is that everyone has a good idea for a new network, right? Like a blockchain, thing, or like, those are all like a blockchain currency would be a network-based product. If one person's taking it and no one else is taking it, I'm not gonna use that thing.
It's
And
not a
even if
currency.
it's
Yeah.
even if it's secure or whatever, I say to like all the nascent networks to be built, people mistake the demand side of it and the advantages of the technical advantages without thinking about how am I getting to an atomic network and ubiquity, because that's the only point where it starts to really take off when I can reliably use it for my set of stakeholders that I interact with.
I hadn't thought about it that way, and I really appreciate how you put that. Is it has to work across my stakeholders, and where there's an advantage is for any individual clinic, provider, system, my stakeholders, putting myself in that system, might look slightly different than others, right? And so you can't have kind of a local innovation. It's like, all right, for this health system, we're going to put this in place, and across all of their stakeholders, it works, right? It may not work globally, but it works for all the people that matter inside of that kind of care network right there.
Totally.
But I do think any broad innovation needs to work across as many stakeholders as possible for it to actually be adopted. again, thinking of that busy clinic, you don't want your physicians or staff to have to be thinking like, oh, wait, do I need to send this way or this other way for it to get to my intended recipient? You want them to just be able to do their job, focus on patient care, which they do better than anything else.
Totally, totally. And that's the atomic network principle. It's like, oh, if you're thinking about for a given problem set, can you bound it? And is it bound by relationships? Is it bound by geography? And in healthcare, yeah, your referral partners are generally local. Sometimes there's now telehealth and stuff that's national, but like, yeah, you can likely bound it for referral partners or labs you send to, or any or payers you interact with. Like the set of participants is bound, so you can get to that atomic network and go from novelty to I'm sufficient for the jobs to be done for this particular provider, in this case, but particular buyer. It's just that as a vendor trying to create a network, you then have to look and say, does that atomic network map to the next person over and to the next person over? Because that's how you build to ubiquity. But it's hard. The time horizon on those types of products, you go and build a point solution or consumer product and start selling tomorrow. So you just need to convince one person to pick it up. For network-based products, you have to first get to atomic. So it's like chicken and egg. How do you get to the 10 referral partners, the 5 payers, whatever the network jobs to be done are? And to get to ubiquity takes decades, for most of the time, unless you're really lucky with regulatory tailwinds.
And I would even say sometimes that challenge makes it so innovation doesn't even start. Because the reality of actually getting your innovative, really good idea to be adopted, the barrier to entry is just too high. What we found is, and we talk a lot about what's best for the physician and the patient. Jumping back to like the vendors, someone who's come up, an entity that's come up with a good idea that is struggling with adoption. What we found is oftentimes these groups are faced with, okay, I'm going to pick one EHR and I'm going to double down on that EHR's footprint and go nowhere else. What in reality that does is it puts a cap on their total addressable market. Practically, all they can do is innovate for Elation users or innovate for Athena users, but the cost becomes exponentially higher if we want to do it across multiple EHRs. And our maybe thesis is that actually stifles innovation, because a really good solution that works in Athena would probably be used by people in Elation. And if we could come up with a layer that allows for that same innovation to work in Athena, ECW, Azalea, you name it, then all of a sudden that total addressable market for any individual innovation gets so much bigger. And all of a sudden you've got the ability to, make a bigger difference for more patients, providers, payers, et cetera, because those barriers to entry to that network have come down quite a bit.
Enter scene, iPaaS, generic API, like that company type is, exactly, is the well articulated problem statement for the class of that class of software vendor and Arrow itself. And so, that is when advising point solutions, it should be, what problem am I solving? Who is it applicable to? And how am I getting there? And focus matters. If someone says, hey, I want to go double down on just one specialty or just one EHR, like that can be good. That can be a good focusing thing to go really solve the problem in a focused way. But if you're looking at it and the problem to be solved is applicable across many specialties, many EHRs, that is when it's worthwhile to consider a partner, because do you want to reinvent the wheel? Does that partner, that integration platform or other tool, add value in accelerating towards that outcome? Is a question worth asking, as is, do I want integration nuances, the wild world of 200, 300 different vendors, to be a core competency? And those are the questions people have to ask. And it is, it is yes for some companies, it is no for others, because some will say, actually, I need to be close to the wire. I can have no one in between me and my health systems, and fine. That's a buying decision that
Sure.
that some may make, but many will find that they are accelerated dramatically when their workflow maps to the integration platform's capabilities, and their EHR target list maps to the integration platforms, what the EHRs they can connect to. And so long as those are true, then integration platforms are a great tool to focus on other problems. To not worry about the things that you and I and your team worry about, which are
Right.
like, how are we scraping the data? How are we getting the API? How are we doing HL7? And all different myriad ways. And you look down and like, I could have learned like Arabic and Japanese instead of HL7 and Fire, just there's so many other things. And so does everyone want to be staring at these data formats and pulling their hair out? Absolutely not. And so there's a reason people look at and purchase and use these solutions very successfully. And so people just have to run that math and look at where they are in their journey. I would say that they probably should only do so when they've started to figure out their value proposition and their workflow. Because if they haven't figured those things out, they're going to come to you and say, David, can we use you? And you're like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
like what are
What are you trying to
you
accomplish? Yeah.
and with whom? And if they haven't figured out the value proposition, they certainly
Right.
don't know who they're selling to. And you'll be like, well, yes, we can help
Right.
you. But it will be a journey that will be,
Exactly. This will be a journey.
yeah. And so, I think those are things that we typically at HD advise a lot of people to do first. It's like,
Yeah.
figure out your value proposition. Make sure you're solving a problem. Don't worry about integration until you're ready. This is going to make it easier for David's team or my team or whomever is helping. If you're able to articulate, okay, I am a patient outreach tool, or I'm a referral partner for dentists, or whatever it might be, and
Yeah.
that will drive particular data flows. And then David, your team, you can say, "Yep, we facilitate that with
You do
Dentrix,"
that.
or
Right.
"We don't do that."
Yeah.
And for me, I can say, "Okay, here is for Dentrix or whoever. Here are the capabilities they make available, and here's how you do the job to be done. Here, you need to do RPA, and you won't be doing that, so you choose a partner." It just becomes very, when you're talking in super high level terms, let's say, well, should I use a Redux, or should I use Vim, or should I use Arrow? It's like, if you don't know what you're going after, you don't know the value you're providing, that is where you should be spending your calories until you do.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. I feel like that's almost good life advice in general. Uh, I just think of like, you got to know what you want to be good at, right? Like, make sure you've got that dialed in. And part of that kind of discovery is also knowing what you don't want to be good at, right? Like, what's expertise that you don't want to cultivate and pay for and maintain and everything else. And that's and you cue it up so nicely, but that's where we step in, right? Is like, we want our clients to be experts at what they do, and let us handle the stuff that they don't want to be experts in. Let them be the very best X, and we'll just make sure that gets to their, to their customer base. We'll make sure they are the easiest X to use, and they don't have to build that core competency in integration and everything else. At the same time, and I just kind of echo what you're saying, that's something that we have to look at as well. Our approach is not a one size fits all, and we know it'll work for everyone. Our approach is very specific. There are things we're really, really good at. We consider ourselves best in class at those items, but there are things that we're not good at. Our approach is not a replacement for a backend API connection to kind of plumb the depths of all the EHR data. That's not what we do. But we're really good at getting those kind of those point solutions directly in front of the physician when a decision is being made. And that's where we've seen incredible success, and our clients have seen incredible success from that. But again, it goes back to what you're saying. Know what you're trying to be good at, and stick with that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a twin, identical twin. He got
Okay.
all the financial brain. So like you throw EBITDA at me, I'm like, I don't know what the heck's going on here. And like you just gotta draw your lines in the sand. I do
Yeah.
need to work on financial stuff. But hey, I think we're coming up on time.
Yeah.
So
This was
really glad to be
wonderful. Thank you both for sharing your insight and knowledge and all of the great conversation. You didn't need me for a moment here. And so I was able to just sit back and listen, which is always nice. If you would like to get in touch with Brendan or with Dave, their contact information is in the chat, and we will throw it up on the screen as well. And we will also add a link if you want to learn more about the Arrowhealth solutions. We have thrown a link to schedule a demo with our team, and we'd love to get some time on the calendar with you. So thanks again, and we will see you next time.
Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Thank you so much.
Gosh.